I cheated on my husband with my boss but got caught. I used to think my marriage was unshakable. Sure, it wasn't perfect. Whose is? But John and I had built something solid, something real. Or at least, that's what I told myself. When I look back now, I can see how the cracks started forming, slowly and quietly, until the foundation of everything we had began to crumble. John was the kind of man who believed in providing, in working hard for his family. And he did just that. He worked long hours, often coming home exhausted, too tired to do anything but collapse onto the couch. I didn't resent him for it. Not at first. After all, he was doing it for us, right? But over time, the late nights turned into early mornings, and the small, intimate moments we used to share became fewer and farther between. I'd wait up for him sometimes, hoping he'd notice the effort I'd put into dinner, or how I'd lit candles to set the mood. But when he'd walk through the door, his tie askew and his face lined with exhaustion, all he'd do was mumble a quick, "Thanks," before disappearing into the bedroom. I don't know when I started feeling invisible. Maybe it was the third or fourth time he forgot our anniversary, or the countless nights I sat alone at the dinner table pushing food around my plate. I wanted to tell him how lonely I was, how much I missed him, but every time I tried, the words got stuck in my throat. I told myself he'd notice eventually, that things would go back to how they were. But they didn't. And then there was Ryan. Ryan was everything John wasn't, or maybe everything John had been once upon a time. He was my boss, yes, but he didn't act like one. He wasn't the type to bark orders or micromanage. Instead, he had this effortless charm, the kind that made you feel special just by being in his presence. It started innocently enough. Late nights at the office were nothing new for me. I worked in marketing, and deadlines didn't care about work-life balance. Ryan would stay late too, pacing his office while brainstorming ideas or reviewing proposals. We'd exchange a few words here and there, mostly work-related, but over time, the conversations became more personal. He'd ask about my life, my interests, my dreams. He'd laugh at my jokes, even the bad ones, and his compliments always felt genuine. "You're really talented, you know that?" he'd say, his eyes locking onto mine in a way that made my heart race. "I don't know what this company would do without you." I didn't realize how starved I was for attention until Ryan started giving it to me. It felt good to be seen, to be heard, to feel like I mattered. I told myself it was harmless, just a little harmless flirting to brighten up the monotony of my days. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. One night, after a particularly grueling meeting, Ryan suggested we grab a drink to unwind. "You've earned it," he said with that disarming smile of his. I hesitated for a moment, but then I thought about John, how he'd probably be asleep by the time I got home, how he wouldn't even notice if I was late. The bar was quiet, tucked away from the bustling city streets. We sat in a corner booth, nursing our drinks and talking about everything and nothing. He told me about his college days, how he'd started the company from scratch, the struggles he'd faced along the way. I found myself opening up to him in ways I hadn't with anyone in years. I told him about my frustrations at home, how distant John had become, how I felt like I was living with a stranger. Ryan listened intently, his gaze never wavering. "You deserve to be happy," he said softly, his hand brushing against mine. The touch sent a jolt through me, and for a moment I forgot where I was. I forgot everything except the way he was looking at me, like I was the only person in the world. I wish I could say I pulled away, that I went home and forgot about it. But I didn't. That night marked the beginning of something I couldn't stop, even if I wanted to. The late-night drinks turned into dinners, and the innocent conversations became anything but. Before I knew it, I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't control. Ryan made me feel alive again. He made me feel wanted, desired, like I was the center of someone's universe. I told myself it wasn't wrong, not really. John had checked out of our marriage long before Ryan ever entered the picture. I was just filling a void he had left behind. It all came crashing down one sunny afternoon, when I was least prepared for it. I had just come back from the office, still buzzing from the memory of Ryan's lips on mine, when I noticed a large bouquet of roses sitting on the kitchen counter. The sight of them made my heart skip a beat. Ryan had mentioned wanting to surprise me, but I never expected him to be so bold. The roses were vibrant, their scent filling the room, and the card tucked inside was unmistakable. To the woman who makes my world brighter every day. Yeah. I barely had time to process the sheer audacity of it when I heard the sound of the front door opening. John was home early. His footsteps echoed in the hallway as he approached the kitchen. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest, but it was too late to hide the evidence. He walked in, his eyes immediately landing on the bouquet. "What's this?" he asked, his voice calm but tinged with curiosity. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. "What's this?" John repeated, his tone sharper now. His eyes flicked between me and the bouquet, suspicion darkening his expression. I could feel my chest tightening, my breath caught in my throat. For a moment, I considered lying. Saying it was a work gift, maybe from a client or a team celebration. But as I met his gaze, the weight of the truth crushed me. John wasn't stupid. He'd see through any excuse I tried to spin. And honestly, a part of me didn't care anymore. "It's from Ryan," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The words hung in the air like a bomb about to detonate. I saw the flicker of confusion in John's eyes, followed by a dawning realization. His jaw tightened, and he stepped closer to the counter, his hand brushing against the roses as though touching them would confirm what he feared. "Ryan? Your boss?" he asked, his voice low and trembling. "Yes," I replied, my hands trembling as I clutched the edge of the counter. He sent them to me." The room went silent except for the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. I could feel the tension radiating off him, his anger simmering just below the surface. When he finally spoke, his voice was icy and controlled. "Why?" he demanded, though I was certain he already knew the answer. "Because—" I hesitated, my words catching in my throat. "Because I've been seeing him. It's been happening for a while." The admission hung between us, heavy and unyielding. John's face contorted, a mix of shock, pain, and fury all crashing together in one heartbreaking expression. For a second, I thought he might yell, might throw the bouquet across the room or slam his fist on the counter. But instead, he just stood there, staring at me like I was a stranger. "How long?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "About 3 months," I confessed, the shame creeping into my voice even as I tried to suppress it. "It started with late nights at the office and it just happened." "It just happened?" he repeated, his voice rising. "You're telling me you've been having an affair with your boss for months, and all you can say is, 'It just happened'? Do you even hear yourself?" I flinched at the venom in his words, but I couldn't blame him. He had every right to be furious. Still, a part of me, a small bitter part, felt like I needed to defend myself, to explain why I had done what I did. "You weren't there, John," I said, my voice shaking but growing louder. "You've been so focused on work, on providing, that you completely forgot about me. I was alone, lonely, and Ryan was there for me in ways you haven't been for years." His eyes widened in disbelief. "Are you seriously blaming me for this? For your decision to cheat?" "I'm not blaming you," I shot back, though my tone said otherwise. "I'm just saying that I felt invisible in this marriage. I tried to talk to you, to tell you how I was feeling, but you never listened. You were always too busy or too tired. And Ryan, he made me feel wanted again. He made me feel alive." John let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "So, what? You couldn't handle a rough patch in our marriage, so you decided to run off to the first guy who gave you attention? That's your excuse?" "It's not an excuse," I said, my voice breaking. "It's the truth. I was drowning, and you didn't even notice." For a moment, John just stared at me, his expression unreadable. Then he turned and walked to the other side of the room, running a hand through his hair. His shoulders were tense, his breathing uneven. I could tell he was trying to keep himself from exploding, but the anger was radiating off him in waves. "Do you even regret it?" he asked finally, turning back to face me. His question caught me off guard. Did I regret it? The rational part of me wanted to say yes, to tell him that I was sorry, that I wished I could take it all back. But deep down, I knew that wasn't entirely true. I didn't regret the way Ryan had made me feel, the way he had reminded me of what it was like to be seen, to be valued. I regretted the pain I was causing John, but not the affair itself. I don't know, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I regret hurting you, but I don't regret how it made me feel. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. John's face twisted with a mixture of disbelief and disgust. Wow, he said, his voice dripping with bitterness. Just, wow. You really don't see what you've done, do you? You've destroyed everything we had and you even care. That's not fair, I snapped, my own anger bubbling to the surface. You're acting like this is all my fault, but you're the one who checked out of this marriage long before I did. I tried, John. I really tried, but you were never there. You made me feel like I didn't matter. And so what? That gives you the right to cheat? To betray me? He shot back, his voice rising. You could have talked to me. You could have told me how you were feeling. But instead, you decided to blow up our marriage because you couldn't handle being lonely. I did try to talk to you, I yelled, the frustration and guilt finally spilling over. But you never listened. You were always too busy, too tired, too focused on everything else. I needed you, John. And you weren't there. The room fell silent again, the weight of our words hanging in the air. John stared at me, his eyes filled with a pain that cut deeper than any anger ever could. I don't even know who you are anymore, he said finally, his voice breaking. The woman I married would never have done this. She would never have thrown away everything we built together for him. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. What could I say? He was right. I wasn't the woman he had married anymore. Somewhere along the way, I had lost myself, and in the process, I had lost us. John walked out of the kitchen without another word, leaving me alone with the roses and the suffocating silence. I could hear the faint sound of the bedroom door closing, followed by the heavy footsteps of him descending the stairs minutes later. When I looked out the window, I saw him getting into his car, his expression hard and unreadable. As he drove away, a sinking feeling settled in my chest. I didn't know if he was coming back, or if our marriage had just ended for good. Update. Well, things have escalated. After our fight, John came back the next day, but only to pack a bag. He said he needed time to think, and he's been staying with a friend ever since. He won't respond to most of my texts, and when he does, it's short and cold. Meanwhile, Ryan has been trying to act like nothing's wrong. He keeps saying things like, "At least now you're free to be with someone who appreciates you," but honestly, I'm starting to feel suffocated by him. What felt exciting and thrilling before now feels hollow. I'm starting to wonder if I made a huge mistake, but it's too late to take it back now. I also found out that John has been talking to a lawyer. I don't know if he's actually filing for divorce, or if he's just looking into his options, but it feels like he's already given up on us. I don't know what to do. I don't want to lose him,